If there is a formula for sales success, this is how the manufacturer of this car imagines it. Take a big car, give it a low price, done. Such a mathematical equation, 4.5 meters of SUV with an automatic plus 90,000 zlotys equals success. That's what the Chinese would like, but will they succeed? I invite you to the test of the Bestune T77 because I think there's also an unknown X in this equation. I invite you to join the search for it, and if you're new to my channel, my name is Zakharov. Let's get started. And folks, a quick technical note, I'm not sure if this camera shows it, but Christopher Columbus is right in front of us. I'm in Barcelona. Why Barcelona specifically? The reason was totally simple. I didn't want to record up to my waist in snow. I didn't want to record at minus 10 degrees, and that's exactly the kind of weather there is in Poland right now. So I looked at the map to see where the weather was nice, where I could find a dealer who would be willing to lend me a car for a day, and I found one. Barcelona, why not? Great, Kenlu, I highly recommend them. Thank you very much for lending me the car. Really nice team, and I'm driving through Barcelona to tell you about this car. And by the way, considering the city, I think that if this car is lacking anything in terms of looks, it will show up first against the backdrop of Barcelona, for example. But first, a few words about the brand. For many of you, the name Bestune might sound like the name of a Bluetooth speaker, but it's not a brand that came out of nowhere. Well, the Bestune brand belongs to the FAF Group, a Chinese giant, one of the first on that market. But more importantly for our mathematical investigation, the FAF Group, it's like a student who has been sitting at the same desk with the top student for a long time. Well, the FAF Group manufactures Volkswagens and Audis in China, so theoretically they had someone to learn from. The question is, did Bestune T77 actually understand German engineering? As for the appearance, the manufacturer poetically writes in their brochures about raindrops on the grille, flowing aesthetics and so on, but never mind that. Paper and marketing will accept anything objectively. This car has sharp lines, a nice grille, and looks proportional. The stance on 19-inch wheels has an interesting crease and full LED lighting in the name of the frame. It aims for the middle of the compact SUV segment. It looks modern, although I have to admit that apart from those three stripes in the headlights, there isn't really any distinctive feature that would stick in your memory for long. When it comes to the drivetrain, the good news for traditionalists is that there's no plug here. It's not an electric car, it's not a hybrid, it's not a plug-in hybrid. This is a classic of the genre, a 1.5 turbo gasoline engine with direct injection, 160 horsepower, 258 Nm. All of this gets it up to 192 kilometers per hour. But interestingly, the manufacturer is completely silent when it comes to the 0 to 100 time. Physics with this weight and a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic suggests about 10 to 11 seconds, but I'll check it for you in a moment, and I did this measurement for you and it turned out better than I thought. I even did two measurements, I'll tell you why in a moment, but the average is below 10 seconds and quite clearly so. It could have been even better, but unfortunately the tires just couldn't get any traction. By the way, these are some tires that you could also add to the list of reasons why this car might be so cheap. Some Chinese brand Ling, something like that. And maybe if they grip the asphalt a little better, we could shave off a bit more, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter that this car definitely, well, let's not get carried away. It's not a rocket, but it's not a slowpoke either. That's for sure. Why did I do two measurements? Well, because Barcelona, I didn't think about it, is pretty hilly. Either uphill, downhill, or on a slope. And as a result, I had to look for a place. Only somewhere near the airport did I find a side, some kind of technical road where I could speed up. And even then, there was a 0.5% difference in elevation, so I had to go twice to average it out and get a reasonably accurate measurement. The press often shows the partition map during elections, highlighting how Poland is divided. This area chose one, that area another. But let me show you something even more interesting. A map of imported cars, the Eastern Wall, Audi A4 Prestige, the Western Wall, Volkswagen Golf Practicality, the center of Poland, Opel Astra Modesty. Interesting, isn't it? A very clear division. This isn't a theory, these are statistics from the AUTO-DNA report summarizing the year 2025 in the used car market. You'll also find gems like the most frequently damaged cars. Do you know how many BMW 5 Series in the AUTO-DNA database have a recorded damage? 1 in 3, 1 in 2, over 3/4. The link to AUTO-DNA is in the description. It's worth checking it out, not just for interesting facts, but also for vehicle identification number reports, which you should take a look at before buying a car to avoid getting one that's been in an accident or has a tampered odometer. The link is in the description. I invite you to check it out. But acceleration isn't the only parameter worth paying attention to. The size of the fuel tank in this car in our equation is only 45 liters. If I complained about such a tank in economical Japanese hybrids, then here I should complain even more. Here. With an average fuel consumption which according to the catalog is 8.3 per 100, a range of about 400 kilometers, not impressive. There is a solution to this problem, and it's just as traditional as the same drivetrain. It's a liquefied petroleum gas installation. Even though this is an engine with direct injection, the importer offers, of course, for an extra charge, a dedicated gas installation. Then the small tank stops being such a problem because the total range increases to diesel-like values. On the other hand, the costs obviously go down. Of course, with gas you also lose space for a spare wheel and have to do extra inspections, but as always it's a trade-off. Besides the tank, there's one more small detail, the chassis. First, and this is pretty obvious, the platform of this car doesn't allow for all-wheel drive, which is understandable at this price. But secondly, the rear suspension is just a simple torsion beam, no expensive multi-link setup. It's simple, cheap, and durable. And that's the price you pay for a low price at the dealership. I'll come back to this later. Okay, we have the first fuel consumption measurement, 8.2 after 16 kilometers. This is the result I got on the Barcelona bypass roads. And partly in the city, the speed was roughly between 50 and 80 km/h with one short traffic jam. And in the city, it's basically a traffic jam non-stop. It came out to 8.2, it could have been better, it could have been worse, but probably leaning towards the former. Here's an interesting result, achieved because I was deliberately driving to keep it as low as possible. It came out to around 5 liters per 100 km/h, and that was the bypass around Barcelona again, but this time it was completely empty. I was driving according to the regulations at 80 km/h, and I did about 8 kilometers at that pace, and it came out to just under 5 liters per 100 kilometers, let's say 5 liters per 100 kilometers. A reasonable result. I think that's exactly what it should have been in eco driving mode. Now a few words about the interior. Let's start with the sound of closing the door. Attention, maybe it's not some epic legendary sound, but you can't really call it, I don't know, a tinny empty shell either. It's fine. The second thing, the smell, is not like a sneaker. This car doesn't smell like glue. It's just a regular, normal new car smell. So here we have two screens, each 12.03 inches under a single glass panel. They also have a shared animation where the car moves from one screen to the other. Well, you can see there were some ambitious ideas here, but generally who wants that? Someone said it should be simple, clear, not overloaded with information, and that's exactly how it is. As you can see, someone decided that this fits well with a simple and not too expensive car. Here on the right you can see it even better because this whole screen is basically 6 tiles. Here we have the radio, music, those are 2 separate icons, so we probably won't use them. Then some assistant, which we probably won't use either, phone, Bluetooth and settings. There's no navigation here as you can see. And basically, hold on, I'll go to the settings. There are either multimedia settings, and here you start to get a few more options. We also have car settings, where we can see various settings for different assistants. It's all just like in other cars. Of course, you can also adjust things, but as you can see, there aren't that many menu levels, there aren't that many options. There is just basic information, whether that's a drawback or an advantage. Well, for someone who likes to tinker and mess around and feel like even after 2 years they still don't know everything, that's a drawback. And for someone who wants to have just the basic information and doesn't want things to be too complicated, maybe that's actually an advantage. Now the buttons, there are quite a lot of them, and all the buttons are absolutely physical, mechanical, just the way we like it. Notice the separate climate control panel. And I have to say, maybe it's not high-tech, it's very classic, you could even say very conservative, but everything works with a reasonable resistance, makes appropriate sounds, clicks more or less the way I would expect, so it's not a disaster. And as for the feel and use, it's just a completely normal set of buttons. Here, someone was inspired by Mercedes, at least that's what I think, that's what it reminds me of. Oh, this little hood here over the two screens also reminds me of Mercedes. And here too, when it comes to the looks, it's okay. They might have taken inspiration, but when it comes to the build quality, no one really tried to cut corners here. These buttons have a nice click, they offer the right amount of resistance, and they just work, they simply work. Let's move on. Here on the door, look. We have a classic set of buttons. There's not much to discuss here, except that this is a car for 90,000. Attention, in the back, the windows, and on the right, by the way, the driver too, the passenger also has fully automatic windows. And that's not such an obvious thing if you've looked into this topic at dealerships, especially in this kind of budget. Now the storage compartments, here we have a small compartment, a 12V outlet and one USB port that will probably be immediately taken up by an adapter for Android Auto, because here on this simple multimedia system there's no Android Auto. So basically for charging phones we'll only have the 12V outlet left. A detail like that with the phone, it's not really clear what to do with it because there's no charging tray here, so it's not really clear where to put it. Probably only here, so I guess you'll have to put your coffee on the left. There are slats here, so they thought about that too. And now, here's the thing. We also open the compartment under the armrest. It's quite deep, not ventilated, just a hard compartment, although it has a soft bottom. And here's another detail I want to point out. Look, you press it, it opens. Everything works just like it would in any other more expensive brand. It's not like someone just took a nice design and then made it out of the cheapest 3D printer possible. But everything really works. That's just an example. It's not that I fell in love with these doors in particular. Everything is like that. Here's another compartment. You see it opens slowly and of course it's completely plastic inside. At this budget it's hard for it to be any different, just like the compartments in the doors, which are obviously plastic, but I have to admit they're spacious too, and that deserves some praise. Manufacturers often forget about that. And here there's a sunglasses compartment, nicely lined of course, and that's definitely something to praise the car for. Finally, let's say it clearly because it needs to be said a lot. Here piano black, here on the right side, here different inserts around the climate control panel on the doors, once piano black, twice piano black, here everything is piano black. No, we don't like it, we all know that we don't like it, and there's quite a lot of it here, that's also a fact. And when it comes to materials, we're moving on to our favorite stage. So yes, this visor, listen, it's actually not too bad. It's finished, you see, but it moves. Oh, it moves a lot. It doesn't make any loud noises. It's not completely silent, but it doesn't creak either, so it's okay. Here on the dashboard, this whole plastic part is slightly soft. I would say, surprisingly, I expected it to be rock hard here, but absolutely not. Only here, this line that runs directly under the windshield is hard. It continues into the door, where up here the plastic already bends slightly under your finger. Then it transitions into something that has a somewhat interesting texture, but it doesn't feel expensive at all. It's the same with this entire strip in front of the driver and especially the passenger. The printed texture is actually quite nice, but unfortunately the sound doesn't suggest anything expensive. Here we already have hard plastics, which is completely normal in this budget. The armrest on the right isn't hard, but it's not super soft either. And the armrest on the left, I would say it's a little better, but it's still not super comfortable. And finally, the rattling. Here we can grab and squeeze out some sounds. Here too we can squeeze out some sounds. This part moves, that part moves. And it's settled and it stopped making noise, but the first time I grabbed it, it was already making noise. And that's another piece of evidence for our collection that this low price isn't completely random, that they had to cut costs somewhere. Well, the good news is that while driving it doesn't make any noise, it doesn't squeak or creak, so that's good. Now for the 2-meter tall person test, maybe I'll start with the good news. Look above my head, there's still 2 fingers of space, even with a sunroof, which usually takes away a few centimeters. I'm positioned very well in relation to the steering wheel. I don't miss anything, even though the steering wheel is only adjustable in one plane, up and down. You can't pull it out, you can't push it in, but this setting suits me. And additionally, we have here, let me turn the camera around, look at this, we have quite a lot of space for the knees here. I could actually move up quite a bit more on both sides, and that's great news. However, I would still like to sit a bit lower in this car. Look, this is roughly the point where my line of sight cuts across the front windshield, which is exactly at the height of the mirror. If I were looking from this perspective, it would be better, but I'm really sitting very high. And speaking of the driver's point of view, we'll also check the visibility here right away. Big exterior mirrors, that's a plus. The pillars are quite substantial, and here on the right side the pillar is a bit wide. It's also wide, it blends with the mirror, and here it cuts out a section. As you can see in the back we have a small window, but I don't know if that really helps, and with the rear window being so slanted, the rear visibility might not be all that perfect. But the good news is that we also have a camera here, a camera that may not be super high quality, but it's there. It works, and it turns. Yes, it turns. The lines show where I'm going to go. We also have indicators from the parking sensors here. It's not some super advanced set of cameras and so on, but it's there and it works. To sum up, it's a bit of a mix here. There are things I like, things I don't like, but all in all I feel comfortable here in the front, and honestly the back looks better than I expected. I expected to squeeze in but entered easily, and I'm sitting low. I have to admit my knees are relatively quite high, but thanks to that, look, I still have quite a lot of space above my head, in front of my knees too. There are still a few centimeters of space left for my feet. There's really plenty of room and a flat floor. Well, I would say that for this budget they've managed to make quite a lot of space for people sitting in the back out of these 4.5 meters. On top of that, look, we also have air vents here. We have another USB port, so you could say it's really comfortable. Of course, this is a budget car. There are no angle adjustments, no reclining backrests, and there's no sliding rear bench here. Even with the armrest, I have a problem here because there isn't one. Strange, maybe this is some kind of Spanish version after all. The pockets in the rear doors are smaller, but there are also pockets on the right, on the left, behind the seats. I would say it's better than I thought. To sum up, it's not bad, and considering the budget, it's actually really good. Now we're looking into the trunk. Here we have the open button. They had to write it because it's located unintuitively on the right side, not in the center. We open the trunk lid, which is operated manually. That's another proof that a good price doesn't come out of nowhere. We have 391 zlotys, but I had to find this value myself because for some reason it's not in the catalog, and this value, from what I gathered, is not given directly. It also takes into account the capacity above the roller shutter, which means that there's a bit less space under the shutter here. Anyway, it's quite spacious, just look at it. You can see that it's not a small trunk, but it's rather low. From the floor to the roller shutter, I'm not sure how to show it better, but for example, here's a jacket with my backpack and we're already under the shutter. There's lighting, there's a hook, there are 2 pockets, one here, another here, and under the trunk floor there are some additional compartments in the molding. And the wheel is not full size, it's a spare, but it's still a wheel. And in this spot, of course, in Poland, instead of this wheel, there could be a liquefied petroleum gas tank. And I'm also adding a view with the seats folded down. The manufacturer doesn't provide this information either. I had to look for it myself as well. Apparently the trunk capacity in this version is 1,300 liters. Time for driving impressions, because basically I'm running out of time since it's already the last golden hour. I drove all over the city, through the center and around the bypass from every direction. I even went to the Florida hotel to test this car. Also during such drives on winding roads, but also steep uphill, everything has been tested. I can tell you about it. Maybe I'll start with what surprised me the most. It wasn't the acceleration to 100, which we've already mentioned and so on. It was the moose test. Listen, 50 left, right, we keep going, nothing happens. If he manages it, that's way above, closer to what I expected. Simple suspension in the back. The Chinese car is softly suspended, and the Chinese car, because soon we'll have a reaction from all the assist systems, I'll have a flashing Christmas tree. During this maneuver, none of that happened. It just turned one way, then the other. No oversteer, no understeer, not even a squeal from the tires, not even any resistance on the steering wheel. It was simply a perfectly executed maneuver. I've done this a few times already, not wanting to believe it works this well, so I kept jerking faster and faster. Even when I yank it with all my strength, there's still zero resistance on the steering wheel. Then a slight squeal from the tires appears, but they're not slipping, they're just squealing. And we keep driving very steadily, no system reacts, nothing gets in our way or helps us. So in that regard, I was really way above my expectations, and I think that's worth mentioning first. The second thing about the driving impressions when it comes to dynamics, I've basically already mentioned indirectly when talking about the acceleration to 100. But I have to say one more thing. The real perception of how lively this car is actually depends not only on the engine but also on the gearbox. And the gearbox here, when we drive smoothly, it shifts gears really well, just like a European dual clutch should. Calmly, we don't even notice what's happening, and that's the point. Unless we switch to sport mode, then we hear a bit more of the engine because it revs higher. Sometimes it can even downshift a little. The jerk is fine. That's what I wanted. That's why I put it in S, so it would jerk like that. In drive mode, the gearbox disappears, but when I stop and press the gas hard, then thanks. You give it, you get it. It revs up, but with a certain delay. The immediacy of this reaction is probably half of what we actually feel when we press the gas pedal. Because what does it matter if I have acceleration to 100 in under 10 seconds if I'm driving at 40 now? I press the gas and after a second or so I'm only going 50, 60? Well, it's not that immediate. Maybe I drive electric cars too much, but I feel that in this engine and gearbox tandem, the engine has nothing to be ashamed of, but the gearbox could be a bit more decisive. I think that's the main point about this car. Besides that, you can sometimes hear the engine when it revs up high, but other than that, it's almost not there. So in that regard, the soundproofing is good. I haven't driven on fast roads here, I'll admit there just weren't any roads like that around to go 120, and listen, this car will be well soundproofed on the highway if I had to guess. Probably not insanely well soundproofed, because the price had to come from somewhere, so I assume that at high speeds it will start to get loud in here. But for everyday driving, up to 80, up to 90, it's not a sacrifice just because I paid little. This is a normally driving car with proper suspension that handles well. Even in the Moose test, there weren't any uneven roads here that would reveal the cheaper suspension in the back. If there were potholes, you would definitely feel the difference somewhere in a corner. So as long as we drive on smooth roads, basically this car drives very well. It's not too stiff, it's not too soft. I was also worried that it would be like a couch. Of course, during a test like Washa, it does lean, you can see that. But with that lean, there's no instability when it comes to driving physics. So in that respect, it's really springy, but at the same time tuned sporty enough so that the softness doesn't lead to uncertainty. And that's probably the point, to sum up the driving impression. I would say, just like me, with relative ease. I've found reasons why this car might have such an attractive price in the parking lot. Because I saw that reasons that here and there things were saved on so that the price could be so attractive. Yes, during the driving experience I really can't at any point. Well, unless, as I said, I drove now at 120. And I would have to shout. Maybe, I don't know, at no point during these city speeds, around city speeds. I can't say that after driving this car I feel like it was cheaper. Of course, if we push it in the city, it will use 10 liters in the city, which isn't great. But on the other hand, if we're conservative and we're looking for a car without a plug, and we're happy that there's only a combustion engine under the hood, then it shouldn't surprise us that if you push it hard enough, it doesn't have to be extremely economical. And finally, I'll mention two things, typically Chinese. One is the Advanced Driver Assistance systems, meaning support in various situations. Here, I would actually say that this is one of the most unflappable Chinese cars in this regard. In general, this car didn't warn about anything too often. The only thing which can also be easily turned off with just one click, but when the speed monitoring system is off, it monitors from the very first kilometer per hour. It's kind of pointless because if I'm driving 91 in a 90 zone, let's be honest, they could have given some percentage difference, some hysteresis, anything. And it keeps buzzing at me every now and then, not loudly, it's fine, but it does buzz. Lane keeping assist, things like that, I don't know. I waited and waited, but it never happened. Even though it's turned on, by the way, you can turn it off here with a single physical button. It's very handy, so someone thought it through, but I kept it on the whole time. And actually, it didn't abuse my patience. And the second thing, also very Chinese, is attention. You hear that? He's so Chinese that he couldn't be any more Chinese. Those high frequencies are literally the signature of every Chinese manufacturer. It sounds completely different in European or Japanese cars. You can recognize a Chinese car exactly by those high frequencies, bordering on that annoying high-pitched sound. And that's probably it. I'm running out of light, I'm running out of energy, because honestly I've been working on this car from 9 to 6 and I think it's time for a break. And I thank you for listening to this. I hope it wasn't too long of a story. I stopped the car for the night just to take this shot, exactly what I do at home. So we open the car, this is what it looks like as a welcome. Interestingly, after opening, the rear lights don't turn on, but the LED lighting inside works. Now I've turned on these lights manually and I'm looking at it wondering if it doesn't remind me of the new Kodiaq. I don't know, maybe it's just me who makes that association. Anyway, let's go inside. Now let's see what's illuminated and what's not, and I have to admit there's quite a lot. So the whole set on the steering wheel is illuminated, but all those levers under the steering wheel are not illuminated, and the set of adjustment buttons is. Notice that the buttons on the gear selection joystick are also illuminated. We also have buttons here under the steering wheel on the doors, as well as a full set here on the doors too, but the storage compartments are not illuminated. Actually, none of them are illuminated. Neither the one with the USB port, nor the 12-volt outlet, nor the cup holders, nor the armrest compartment. But there is a good exception, and it's actually quite nice because look at the light in the glove compartment here. The door pockets are not illuminated, the footwells are not illuminated, and that's it. I think there is some lighting here, but it's not LED. Interestingly, in the sun visors, the button set is also illuminated on the headliner. We have ambient lighting, here you go, on every side, wherever you look, and interestingly and importantly, also in the back, both the buttons and the ambient lighting. And there's some button up top for the light, and as you can see, it's also illuminated in the back, so you don't see the bottom here. Savings and budget options, honestly you can't see it, and now the promised prices. Let's add it up. The version from 2589 900, the version with electric passenger seat, front sensors, 360 cameras, blind spot assistance, ambient lighting, better ventilation. It costs 10,000 zlotys more. Extra charge for the color is 2,500 fully loaded. From last year that's thousands of zlotys, and from this year about 120. What does the market say? Well, the old guard. Toyota, Volkswagen, Kia at this price will give us either a segment B car like the Yaris Cross, or a bare-bones compact with a manual gearbox and hubcaps. The Dacia Duster with an automatic front-wheel drive and similar power is also a bit more expensive. I think the real competition for this car is actually other players from China, with whom this car can compete the most, probably with its possible German looks. And I think conservative buyers should like that. But how many of them are there on the market, and are they actually looking for a car? Sales statistics will tell us the truth soon. And finally, it's time to solve our equation and answer the question. Does it actually add up? The calculator says yes at a clearance price of around 90,000 zlotys for the 2025 model year. We're adding a large SUV with a 5-year warranty, which, like all cars from China now, is following the same path that Korean cars once had to take. So it's still earning trust. And as for that unknown X, I talked about the savings in the interior, I talked about the savings in the suspension, fuel consumption and dynamics were also presented, as well as soundproofing, and I think that's about it. First of all, we have to remember that not everyone needs luxury, and this is a budget car. Such cars are also needed. Maybe they're even more needed than others. Because for many people, it's these cars that open the way to a new car instead of a used one. And on top of that, they provide that comfort that with such a purchase price today, the drop in value after a few years probably won't matter that much anymore. So I think that will add up, especially for pragmatic people. Let me know in the comments if 90,000 zlotys for an SUV is an interesting equation for you. And for now, I'll say goodbye. Thank you for watching and see you in the next episodes. Bye!